Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story that completely rewrites the history books we grew up with. We all learned that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, right? Well, what if I told you that another group of Europeans landed on American shores almost 500 years earlier? That's right, we're talking about the Vikings. So, how did these legendary Norse seafarers, known for their raids and epic voyages, manage to cross the treacherous North Atlantic long before the age of massive sailing ships? The story isn't one of a grand, planned expedition for conquest or treasure. Instead, it's a tale of accident, family drama, and sheer, stubborn exploration. It all begins not in Scandinavia, but in Iceland. By the late 9th century, Vikings had settled Iceland, creating a new society on the edge of the known world. But for some, even Iceland wasn't far enough. One of these restless souls was a man named Eric the Red. You might have heard of him. Eric had a bit of a temper problem. After being exiled from Norway for manslaughter, he settled in Iceland. But trouble followed him. He got into another dispute that ended in more killings, and the Icelandic assembly banished him for 3 years. Forced to leave, Eric decided to sail west. He had heard rumors of a vast land spotted by an earlier sailor who was blown off course. So, around the year 982, Eric set sail into the unknown. After a perilous journey, he landed on the shores of a massive, icy island. He spent his 3 years of exile exploring this new land. Despite its glaciers and harsh conditions, he found lush green fjords and valleys during the summer. When his exile was over, Eric returned to Iceland with a brilliant marketing plan. He needed to convince people to follow him back to this new land. So, what did he call it? He called it Greenland. He reasoned that a more appealing name would attract more settlers, and it worked. In 986, Eric the Red led a fleet of 25 ships packed with hundreds of men, women, and livestock to establish the first European settlement in Greenland. This is where our story of the American discovery truly begins. The Greenland settlement is the crucial stepping stone. Living in this remote outpost, the Norse Greenlanders were tough, resourceful, and always pushing the boundaries of their world. One of the settlers who came with Eric was a man named Herj. His son, Bjarni Herjolfsson, was a merchant sea captain who regularly sailed between Norway and Iceland. One year, around 986, Bjarni set sail from Iceland to join his father in the new Greenland colony. But he was sailing into uncharted territory. A fierce storm blew in from the north, pushing his ship far off course. For days, he and his crew were lost in a thick fog, completely blind. When the fog finally lifted, they saw land, but it didn't match the descriptions of Greenland. This land was hilly and covered in dense forests. It wasn't the icy landscape they were expecting. Confused, but not wanting to risk landing in a completely unknown place, Bjarni decided not to go ashore. He turned his ship north and sailed along the coast for several days. He sighted 2 more distinct land masses. The second was flat and wooded, and the third was a barren glacier-covered island. None of them were Greenland. Bjarni was a pragmatic merchant, not an explorer at heart. His only goal was to find his father. So he turned his ship east, out into the open Atlantic, and after several more days of hard sailing, he finally found the Norse settlements in Greenland. When he arrived, Bjarni told his story of the new lands he'd seen to the west. People were fascinated, but also a little critical. They thought he lacked an explorer's spirit for not even setting foot on this new soil. But the seed of an idea had been planted. The story of these mysterious western lands lingered in the minds of the Greenland, and this is where the most famous character in this saga enters the scene. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red. Leif was described as a wise, strong, and fermented man, the complete opposite of his hot-headed father. He had heard Bjarni's story and was intrigued. Unlike Bjarni, Leif was filled with curiosity and a thirst for adventure. He decided he had to see these lands for himself. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson bought Bjarni Herjolfsson's ship, gathered a crew of 35 men, and prepared for a voyage of pure discovery. He decided to retrace Bjarni's journey, but in reverse. He sailed west from Greenland, determined to find and explore the lands Bjarni had only glimpsed. The first land they reached was the barren, rocky island Bjarni had seen last. Leif decided to go ashore. Stepping onto the flat rocks and seeing the great glaciers behind them, he named it Helgeland, which means land of the flat stones. Today, most historians believe Helgeland was Baffin Island in modern-day Canada. From Helgeland, they sailed south. The next land they found was the flat, wooded coast Bjarni had described. Once again, Leif and his men went ashore. The landscape was covered in white, sandy beaches and vast forests. Leif named this place Markland, which means land of forests. This is widely thought to be the coast of Labrador, but Leif wasn't satisfied. He pushed on, sailing south from Markland for 2 days with a good northeast wind. They finally came upon an island to the north of a mainland. They sailed into a channel between the island and a cape that jutted out from the mainland. The tide was low, and their ship ran aground on the shoals. They were so eager to get to land that they didn't even wait for the tide to come back in. They ran from the ship to the shore. What they found was a paradise compared to Greenland. A river flowed out of a lake. The salmon in the water were bigger than any they had ever seen. And the climate was so mild that cattle wouldn't need to be sheltered for the winter. Most importantly, they found something that was completely absent in Greenland: grapevines growing wild. The discovery of grapes was a huge deal. Wine was a high status drink in Norse culture, and finding a land where grapes grew naturally was incredible. Because of this, Leif Erikson named the land Vinland, or Wineland. He and his men decided to build a small settlement and spend the winter there, exploring the surrounding country. They built several large, tough houses, a base for their New World explorations. After a winter of exploration, they loaded their ship with timber and grapes and sailed back to Greenland. Their voyage, a massive success. Leif returned a hero and earned the nickname Leif the Lucky. Now, for a long time, this story was known only from the Icelandic sagas, the Vinland Saga, specifically the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red. These were epic oral histories written down centuries later. For many historians, they were just myths, fantastic tales of a mythical land. There was no physical proof. That all changed in 1960. A Norwegian husband and wife team of explorers and archaeologists, Helge and Anstein Ingstad, were searching for clues along the Canadian coast. At the northernmost tip of Newfoundland, at a place called Lonso Meadows, they found something extraordinary. They uncovered the remains of a Norse settlement. Excavations revealed the outlines of 8 turf-walled buildings, including longhouses and workshops, identical in construction to those found in Greenland and Iceland from the same period. They found a smithy with a forge and slag from smelting iron, a technology unknown to the native peoples of North America at that time. They also found artifacts like a bronze cloak pit, a bone needle, and a spindle whorl, which proved that both men and women had lived there. Radiocarbon dating placed the site squarely in the time of Leif Erikson, around the year 1000. This was the smoking gun. Lonso Meadows was the first and, so far, the only authenticated Norse site in North America. It proved that the sagas were not just legends. They were based on real events. Vikings had indeed reached the Americas and even built a settlement nearly 500 years before Columbus. So, why didn't they stay? Why didn't Vinland become a permanent Norse colony like Greenland or Iceland? The sagas give us some pretty clear answers. After Leif's successful journey, other expeditions followed, led by his siblings, but these later voyages were plagued by internal conflicts and, crucially, hostile encounters with the native inhabitants. The Norse called the indigenous people Skrælings. The sagas describe both trade and violent clashes. One story tells of Leif's brother Thorvald, who was killed by an arrow in a fight with the natives. Another expedition, led by a man named Thorfinn, attempted a more permanent settlement with women and livestock. But constant conflict with the Skrælings made life too dangerous. Ultimately, the Norse were simply too few and too far from home. Greenland itself was a small colony of only a few hundred people. They couldn't spare the manpower or resources to sustain a settlement across the ocean, especially in the face of resistance from a much larger native population. After just a few years of attempts, the Norse abandoned their Vinland settlement and sailed back to Greenland. And so, the Viking presence in America faded into memory, preserved only in their oral sagas. It would be almost 5 centuries before another European, Christopher Columbus, would make the same journey and change the world forever. But the story of Leif Erikson and the Viking discovery of America is a powerful reminder that history is often more complex and fascinating than we read taught in school. It's a testament to the incredible skill, bravery, and relentless spirit of the Norse explorers, who, in their small lung, crossed an ocean and became the first Europeans to stand on the shores of the New World. What do you think about this incredible piece of history? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It's a story that deserves to be told. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more historical deep dives. See you in the next video.